What you're about to hear isn't the sanitized version found in training manuals or official after-action reports. According to declassified military records and first-hand sniper testimonies, some of the most dangerous enemies American soldiers faced in Southeast Asia never fired a shot. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't speak. They didn't leave footprints meant to be followed. They waited. Military archives confirm that during long-range surveillance and elimination missions deep inside the jungles of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, U.S. snipers were forced to remain motionless for hours, sometimes entire nights, in terrain ruled by a predator that had perfected the art of silent killing long before modern warfare existed. The tiger. Not a myth. Not jungle folklore. A living, breathing apex predator capable of killing a fully grown man in seconds, without warning, without sound, and without leaving a chance to react. And what makes this truth disturbing is not just the animal itself. It's the fact that soldiers knew it was there, and could do absolutely nothing about it. Pay close attention now. Because this is the side of war few are willing to discuss, the moments when training, weapons, and command structures become irrelevant, and survival depends entirely on staying perfectly still while something unseen decides whether you live or die. Snipers were trained to control their breathing, regulate heart rate, and ignore pain. They could lie in mud for hours with ants crawling inside their uniforms. They could watch through scopes while muscles cramped and joints locked. But no training prepared them for the psychological weight of knowing that, in the dark, they were no longer the top predator. Night missions were the worst. As daylight faded, the jungle didn't sleep, it listened. The sounds changed. Insects went quiet in patches. Birds vanished abruptly. And experienced soldiers learned that silence, in the jungle, was never neutral. It was a warning. Veterans recall the same pattern repeating itself over and over. A thick branch snapping, too heavy for a monkey. Leaves parting slowly, deliberately. Breathing that didn't belong to a man. Then nothing. Silent. Sudden. Fatal if you moved. This investigation identifies several recurring elements described across independent sniper testimonies, unit logs, and field reports. Each represents a distinct layer of fear that built upon the last, turning the jungle itself into a psychological weapon. The first, and least forgiving, was the sound. Tigers do not charge blindly. They stalk. Their steps are calculated, slow, and almost impossibly quiet for an animal of that size. What soldiers feared most wasn't noise, it was the wrong kind of noise. A single heavy footfall placed too carefully. A low, controlled exhale close enough to feel but not see. One former Marine sniper described it simply. You didn't hear it coming. You heard it deciding. From a technical standpoint, the tiger's padded paws disperse weight evenly, allowing it to move through dense undergrowth with minimal disturbance. Combined with night vision adapted over thousands of years, it meant the animal could see long before it was seen and choose its angle of attack without urgency. In fixed sniper positions, this created an impossible dilemma. Any movement could compromise concealment. Any reaction could expose position to enemy patrols. But staying still meant accepting the risk of being prey. The jungle forced them into a single option, absolute stillness. And that stillness came at a cost. Heart rate spiked. Muscles trembled under forced restraint. The mind raced through scenarios it could not resolve. Veterans described the sensation as being trapped inside their own bodies, aware, alert, and powerless. A nightmare you couldn't wake from. And this was only the beginning. Because as the nights stretched longer and the missions deeper, soldiers began to realize something even more disturbing. The enemy sometimes knew exactly where the tigers hunted and chose those areas deliberately. But that escalation comes next. According to after-action intelligence summaries and veteran debriefings, the fear didn't remain theoretical for long. It became tactical. As American sniper teams pushed deeper into contested jungle corridors, patterns began to emerge, not in firefights, but in positioning. Certain observation points were consistently located near game trails. Natural clearings. River bends where animal movement was heavy after dusk. At first, this was dismissed as coincidence. Terrain dictated movement. The jungle offered limited options. But veterans noticed something unsettling. Enemy patrols avoided these zones at night. American snipers were sent into them. Pay attention to this distinction, because it reframes everything. Former reconnaissance operators describe being inserted into areas locals openly avoided after sunset. Villagers refused to guide units through certain valleys. Indigenous trackers would halt abruptly, signaling danger not from men, but from what hunted there. Tigers were territorial, predictable, and that predictability could be exploited. U.S. snipers, operating under orders to maintain visual contact on enemy supply routes, were sometimes forced to occupy fixed hides directly inside known hunting grounds. The logic was purely military: fewer enemy patrols, better concealment, higher intelligence yield. The cost was psychological. In these positions, movement was not an option. Snipers constructed hides barely large enough to breathe. They remained camouflaged under foliage, mud, and netting, sometimes for 12 to 20 hours without shifting weight. At night, the jungle changed ownership. Veterans describe how the ambient noise would suddenly thin out. Frogs would stop calling. Insects would scatter. The absence of sound was not calming, it was paralyzing. It meant something large had entered the area. Then came the waiting. A tiger does not rush. It circles. It tests. It watches. Soldiers recall the sensation of being observed from multiple angles without ever seeing movement. No glowing eyes. No rustling brush. Just presence. One Army sniper recalled feeling warm breath brush the back of his neck close enough to raise the hair, not close enough to confirm. He did not move. He could not move. Any shift of position would expose his silhouette to enemy lines less than 200 meters away. This is where fear became something else entirely. Not panic. Not adrenaline. Control under unbearable pressure. From a biological standpoint, the tiger was perfectly evolved for this environment. Its stripes broke up its outline under moonlight. Its body mass allowed explosive acceleration over short distances. A single strike to the neck could crush vertebrae instantly. From a psychological standpoint, the effect was devastating. Snipers were trained to dominate terrain, to observe without being seen, to be the unseen presence that decided life and death. In the jungle at night, that role was reversed. Men reported involuntary muscle spasms they had to suppress. Jaw clenching so intense it caused fractures. Hallucinations from sleep deprivation and fear. The mind began to invent movement where none existed, or worse, ignore movement that did. Every second stretched. Every breath felt too loud. Every heartbeat sounded like a signal flare. Silent. Calculated. Unforgiving. And yet, the most disturbing detail did not come from fear alone, but from restraint. Multiple veterans confirmed that they believed, with certainty, that at least some tigers knew they were there, and chose not to attack immediately. Predators test. They observe weakness. They wait for motion. Which meant the longest nights were not those filled with noise, but those filled with nothing at all. Because silence meant the hunt was still ongoing. And as the hours passed, another realization began to set in, one that stripped away any remaining illusion of control. The jungle wasn't just hostile. It was alive. And it was deciding. Military psychology reports compiled after Southeast Asia deployments reveal a pattern that commanders struggled to explain. Snipers returning from jungle operations showed stress markers inconsistent with combat engagement. There were no firefights. No casualties. No recorded enemy contact. And yet, the damage was real. Insomnia. Hypervigilance. Persistent auditory hallucinations. The cause, according to post-mission interviews, was not the enemy soldier but the sustained experience of being hunted without certainty. Unlike human threats, a tiger did not follow rules of engagement. It did not react predictably to noise or movement. It did not care about camouflage doctrine or rank. Its presence introduced a form of fear that bypassed training and went straight to instinct. The oldest one. Veterans describe a shift in perception that occurred after repeated night exposures. The jungle stopped being terrain and became an entity. Shadows felt deliberate. Darkness felt intentional. Every sound was interpreted not as random, but as purposeful. This psychological load compounded over time. In fixed hides, snipers were required to control every involuntary response. Swallowing. Scratching. Adjusting circulation. The body's natural survival signals, shake, run, breathe harder, had to be overridden consciously. One sniper explained it this way. You're telling your body to die quietly if it has to. From a neurological standpoint, this level of sustained suppression triggers extreme stress responses. Cortisol levels remain elevated for hours. Fine motor control deteriorates. Time perception distorts. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel endless. And the tiger, whether present or not, became the focal point of that stress. The most damaging nights were those without confirmation. When a tiger attacked livestock or patrols, the threat was clear. But when there was only suggestion, a snapped branch, a heavy shift of weight in the undergrowth, the mind filled in the gaps. Veterans recall replaying the same sound repeatedly, trying to classify it. Too heavy for wind. Too controlled for accident. Too close to ignore. Then nothing. This created a feedback loop of fear and restraint. The longer nothing happened, the worse the tension became. Muscles cramped. Limbs went numb. Blood flow slowed. Some soldiers reported temporary paralysis from maintaining a single position too long. And still, they did not move. Because movement meant death from one predator or another. Documents from field medics mention cases where snipers returned unable to tolerate darkness. Others developed acute sensitivity to forest sounds back home, the rustle of leaves, the snap of wood in winter forests, even the creak of a house settling at night. What made these symptoms difficult to treat was the absence of a clear event. There was no single moment of terror to process. The trauma was cumulative. It was the hours of waiting. The certainty that something was there. The knowledge that it could end everything without warning. Sudden. Silent. Final. As this investigation continues, another layer emerges, one that veterans often hesitate to discuss openly. Because in rare cases, the waiting did end. And when it did, it proved that the fear had not been imagined. It had been measured. It had been justified. And it left marks that no official report ever recorded. Declassified incident summaries and fragmented field reports confirm what many veterans only hinted at in interviews. In rare but documented cases, the predator did not withdraw. It committed. Official language softened the reality. Phrases like animal encounter or non-combat fatality appear in records, stripped of detail and context. But cross-reference testimonies paint a far more brutal picture. When a tiger chose to attack, it did not hesitate. The strike was instantaneous. No warning growl. No charge through brush. Just impact. A force from behind. A crushing weight. And silence again. From a technical perspective, the tiger's attack method explains why survival was unlikely. The animal targeted the cervical spine or base of the skull, using jaw strength measured at over 1,000 pounds per square inch. The goal was not injury. It was immediate shutdown. Veterans who witnessed the aftermath describe bodies found meters from original positions, dragged effortlessly through dense terrain. Weapons remained unfired. Radios untouched. No struggle. Because there was no time. But the most disturbing accounts came not from confirmed attacks, but from near encounters. Snipers recount moments when the tiger closed the distance without striking. The sound of breath directly behind them. The pressure of weight on foliage inches away. One Marine described feeling whiskers brush his ear. He did not move. Minutes passed. Then longer. Then nothing. the tiger withdrew. Why remains unclear. Predators assess risk. A human shape that does not flee, does not react, does not display panic may confuse instinct. Or perhaps the presence of unfamiliar scents, weapons oil, or human sweat disrupted the final decision. Whatever the reason, those who survived these moments describe them as worse than combat. Because survival felt arbitrary. In these encounters, the mind reached a breaking point. Some soldiers dissociated completely. Vision narrowed. Sound dulled. Thought slowed. Others entered a state of hyperclarity, every detail etched permanently into memory. The dampness of leaves. The smell of soil. The weight of breath inside their chest. And always, the knowledge that if the animal decided differently, there would be no second chance. By the time dawn arrived, relief was not immediate. Veterans described the first light as deceptive. The jungle appeared harmless again. Birds returned. Insects resumed their noise. But the damage had already been done. The fear did not leave with the darkness. It stayed. It followed them home. And as the investigation reaches its final stage, one truth becomes unavoidable: the tiger was not just an external threat. It became a permanent presence in the minds of those who waited for it in the dark. That reckoning comes next. When veterans speak about Southeast Asia decades later, they rarely begin with firefights or enemy patrols. They speak about nights. About waiting. About listening. Because what followed them home was not just memory, it was conditioning. Military psychological evaluations conducted years after the war revealed that many former snipers carried a persistent sense of being observed. Even in safe environments. Even in daylight. A subtle tension that never fully released. Forests became intolerable. Darkness became threatening. Silence became unbearable. The tiger, whether encountered directly or not, had rewired something fundamental. From a human perspective, this experience shattered a core assumption ingrained in combat training, that skill and discipline could overcome any threat. In the jungle at night, that belief collapsed. No amount of marksmanship could stop what you could not see. No amount of experience could predict when instinct would override restraint. No amount of courage could eliminate the knowledge that survival depended on the decision of something else. This was not fear of death. It was fear of irrelevance. Veterans described the long-term impact as a form of psychological echo. Sudden noises triggered immediate physical responses. A snapped branch in a park. Heavy footsteps behind them. The unnatural quiet before a storm. Their bodies reacted before thought could intervene. Heart rate spiked. Muscles locked. Breathing slowed involuntarily. The same stillness returned. Because once learned, that stillness never truly disappears. In closing this investigation, one fact stands out clearly: during those nights, the jungle itself became a weapon. Not through violence alone, but through presence. Through uncertainty. Through silence. The tiger did not need to attack every time. It only needed to exist. And for the men who lay motionless beneath the canopy, that knowledge was enough to turn hours into eternity and darkness into a battlefield without rules. This documentary is not about myth. It is about records, testimonies, and the psychological cost of surviving an enemy you were never meant to fight. To those who endured those nights unseen, unheard, and unmoving, this story stands as acknowledgement and remembrance. If this investigation revealed something you didn't know about the realities of war, support the work by leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing these stories so they are never lost to silence.